Everybody awake out there? Okay, let's try it again. Is everybody awake out there? All right, here's one of the rules of my game here. Number one, if I say, "Are you ready?" you say, "I was born ready." Are you ready? Oh, come on. I know you're better than that. Let's try it again. I'm going to talk about insects today. I'm going to give you some information on. Some of you probably already know it. Some of you may learn something new about this. But let's get started. Are you ready? I was born ready, okay? All right, let's get started. First slide, please. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit first about entomology. And I'm not going to get in a lot of detail about it. Next slide, please. But if you're interested in becoming an entomologist, most people pursue a degree in biology, but you could also pursue a degree in chemistry or biochemistry. A lot of physics is done, studying the flight of insects and things like that. Engineering is a big thing right now. They're studying insects for nanotechnology purposes. You know, the term bug, they can create now a drone that's about the size of a bug, and they can just fly it in there, and people just think it's a bug on the wall where they're taking pictures and listening to you. So watch out. Some things in the degree path would include morphology and physiology, which is basically how things are put together and how they work. And biochemistry, you know, I took all that chemistry stuff in high school and college and stuff, and it didn't make sense to me at all till I took biochemistry. You know, great course, so I encourage you to take it, even if you're not a science major. Genetics, ecology and environmental science, taxonomy. Now, mycology is the study of fungus, and bacteriology is the study of bacteria, because they're using those agents for biological control of insects nowadays. So there's a big area of research in that, and nowadays, anybody that's going to pursue a career in entomology needs to know something about that. And there's a bunch of other ones too. NIU doesn't have a department of entomology, but there's a really good one at the University of Illinois in what I call banana shampoo. Oh, I'm sorry, Champaign-Urbana. Okay, next slide, please. All right, insects rule the world. There's more insects on Earth than there is any other creature, more than all the plants and animals combined, over 1 million species, and that has been identified. And there's a lot more than that. We just don't know it yet. And I thought this was kind of interesting. 1 out of every 5 animals is a beetle, like a June bug. Okay, next slide, please. So, why are they so successful, you may ask? Well, they're small, multi-generational. They can fly. Every insect has the capability of flying, even though there are some that don't. Okay, and then likewise, they eat just about anything. And there's a wide variety of habitats and resources that they can exist in. Did you know there are insects on Antarctica? Yeah, they are. It's pretty cold there. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we've got more than 1,000 species of insects found everywhere in North America and beyond, and so forth. Some are very harmful, but some are also helpful. Okay. Now, oh, did I tell you I was going to have quizzes today? I'm going to give you quizzes today, and I think at most of the tables there's a tablet, an iPad, and you will be able to respond to the quiz questions when we get to them. All right, so get your iPads ready and so forth, because work as a group and you can answer the question if you think you know the answer. All right, next slide, please. So let's examine some insects that are good and which ones that are bad and so forth. And so the first question is, are lady beetles, actually they're called ladybird beetles, but most people refer to them as ladybugs. And this is the true ladybird beetle. The Asian beetle doesn't have the white border around its head and so forth. So let's figure out, are ladybird beetles, are they good or are they bad? And you can dial in on your iPads there.
So to do this activity, go ahead and wake up your iPads by clicking the home button and then click the Safari icon.
you ready? I was born ready. Oh, come on, you guys. You're no fun. I know you got it in you. Oh, look at there. Okay, so 10 groups say that they're good, and only 3 groups say that they're bad. Okay, who are the groups that said they were bad? Okay, I assume you got a good reason for that. Next slide, please. All right, they're good when they eat aphids. Did you know aphids are so prolific? If ladybugs didn't consume them, and they're ferocious predators, if they didn't eat them, that aphids would take over the world. How many believe that? Yeah, well, good luck to the rest of you. All right. They're bad, though, when they collect by the hundreds outside your house, and we've all seen that. Next slide, please. Okay. How many have seen that? Okay, now the Asian beetles do this too. Okay, and there's a reason why they do that. They emit a substance called a pheromone, and the pheromone causes them to aggregate, and they go to that area. What do you suppose they do there? Well, we'll talk about that another time. Can you go to the previous slide? In this particular slide, you can see on the left is an adult, and on the right is the larvae. The larvae are also ferocious predators, and both eat aphids, and they eat them by the thousands. Next slide. Okay, next question. Good or bad? Now, this one's kind of tricky. I know I mentioned North America earlier. This particular species actually is found in Costa Rica. But there are similar species that exist in the United States. Most of them are around Florida. Okay, so good or bad? Okay, which group said that this is a bad insect? Okay, you guys right there. Why do you say that?
Yeah, why? Looks evil.
Okay, so you're guessing, right? Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, this is a nasty booger. Okay, and they have those spines, those hair-like structures, actually are connected to poisonous glands, and they can inflict serious pain. Now, that particular one most of the time gives you an irritation like poison ivy or something like that, but there are some that are very deadly poison, and if you come in contact with it and you don't get treatment right away, you will die from it. I mean, so that's a pretty nasty caterpillar. All right, next slide, please. All right, honeybees, good or bad? Boy, that's pretty unanimous, isn't it? How many have heard of the African killer bees? They're honeybees. Next slide, please. Honeybees are, they're good when they pollinate and produce honey. I mean, we like that. It's very helpful to agriculture and everything. However, they're bad when they sting you. Next slide. For example, the person on the left there, people swell up tremendously, and there are also people that are highly allergic to the venom. The venom's a protein, and they can go into what's called anaphylaxis, where your tongue swells up and your throat swells shut and you can't breathe and so forth, and people have died from that. Now, it also says down here 500 to 1,000 stings to kill the average person. All right, this is what those African killer bees do. They're honeybees and so forth, but they have this very aggressive swarming ability. When they start releasing the alarm pheromone, they swarm and they get very aggressive and agitated and so forth, and they'll just attack whatever threatens the nest. And they're relentless. They'll continue to attack and attack and attack and attack. They'll crawl up your nose, into your ears, all the while stinging you. They'll crawl into your mouth, suffocate you, all the while stinging you, and so forth, and everywhere else on your body. So, next slide, please. So how did this happen? All right, well, the Europeans first introduced honeybees to the Americas when they colonized the United States and so forth. And in the 1950s, they brought these African honeybees from South Africa. And the idea was the African honeybees have a higher production of honey. And so by breeding the two, they'd get good quality honey from the European honeybees. And they would then be able to get a more production out of the bees through genetics. This is one of those first situations of genetic engineering. Okay, in case you didn't know about that. Next slide. All right, so they allowed the two species to interbreed, and they did. Next slide. And so now we have what are called Africanized honeybees. And they were actually introduced in South and Central America, and they've just migrated up the Americas into the United States. A lot of times I've seen these sites where the hives and so forth are located in like Arizona, and they have a huge fence around them. So you can't get too close, because if you get too close, you'll alarm the hive, and then all of a sudden you're in big trouble. Okay, so they keep people away from them so that you don't stumble onto one accidentally and have a disaster. Next slide. All right, so what about these killer bees? Next slide. As far as the venom potency is concerned, per volume, it's the same. Okay, next slide. However, if you threaten the hive, you get this alarm pheromone that's produced, and their attack is much fuller, faster. They'll chase you further, and so forth, and longer. They're relentless. And next slide. So if you happen to be attacked by a swarm, when you run away and so forth, be sure you cover your mouth so that they don't get in your mouth, and things like that. Now, I'm going to assume none of you are going to get in trouble like that, right? This means yes. This means no. Okay? Just checking. All right? Next slide. The other thing is that they have a tendency to swarm very readily. And again, it's that alarm pheromone that's going to cause them to swarm and so forth. Next slide. So a swarm means they're going to leave the hive readily. They're going to come out and they're going to attack. That's a pretty awesome picture right there. Next slide. But not all swarms are bad. This is one of the ways that they split the colony when it gets overpopulated, or if there's two queens. Two things can happen if there's two queens. One, the two queens fight to the death, and whoever survives then controls the colony. But there's also the possibility that one of the queens will fly off and take some of the population with her. And that's another reason why bees will swarm, is to do things like that. And so they find a new nesting site and so forth. And I always thought that picture of people that I would never do that. I think that guy's crazy. But they'll do it. They go for a Guinness World Record. How many bees can you get on them? I don't know what the record is, but it's incredible. Next slide. All right, next question. Termites. Good or bad? Now be careful. I like to play stump the students, Wow, I didn't scare anybody, did I? Next slide, please. All right, they're bad when they eat wood in your house. They can do a tremendous amount of damage to homes and so forth. And in fact, if you buy a house, one of the first things that you'll have done is an inspection. And part of that inspection should be, are there the effect of termites in the house or not? And it's easy to see because they leave a lot of litter and stuff behind. However, they are good because they're responsible for the breakdown of fallen trees in wooded areas and on property and so forth. And so they do have a role to play in the ecology as well.